In the beginning of this episode, we are presented with a battle taking place between Lipuliko's royal army and the vampires. The royal army suffers a heavy defeat because the vampire forces can wield powerful magic. One of the vampire soldiers reports to their leader that the opposing forces are on the brink of defeat, and victory is within their grasp. The soldiers are elated and immediately plan a victory celebration for when the war ends. However, from inside the tent, one of their leaders remarks that they are not necessarily winning yet. They scold the soldiers for planning a party without knowing what the enemy might be hiding. They sternly state that their troops are a group of shameless and foolish individuals. They explain that this is the first war for the Mole Knight Empire, and they cannot afford to lose. The man then seeks approval from their leader, Her Majesty Tarakamari. Tarakamari agrees with the statement made by the man named Chastel. Tarakamari then rises from her seat, heads outside the tent, and loudly declares to her troops that she is Tarakamari Yanda's blood. The scene suddenly shifts to show Tarakamari's cute face as she enjoys life while lounging in her room. She states that she has been a shut-in professional for the past 3 years. Then, Tarakamari awakens from her sleep, stretches her body, and reflects that she finds the world to be unfair. 15 years ago, she was born into the renowned aristocratic Gandasblood family in the Mole Knight Empire. The Gandasblood family has always served as the commanders of the war forces for 1,000 years. Tarakamari mentions that she, too, worked hard to meet people's expectations but quickly became disheartened. She has several shortcomings. First, she cannot use magic. Second, she has no athletic talents whatsoever. And third, she has a short body. The reason for these 3 shortcomings is quite evident. She is a vampire who cannot drink blood. She dislikes its smell, appearance, and everything about blood disgusts her. As a result, she has had many unpleasant experiences throughout her life. In the vampire social life that esteems strength, Tarakamari swears to be a peaceful and just vampire and decides to become a shut-in at home. As she was contemplating this, suddenly she felt an itch on her stomach. She had scratched it, but the itch didn't go away, which irritated her. After she got up and checked her stomach, she found a red seal, the emblem of the Mole Knight Empire, which slowly disappeared. She was very puzzled about how that could happen. However, before she could dwell on it, a maid suddenly greeted her. She was, of course, quite startled by the presence of someone else in her room. The maid apologized for the late introduction. The maid's name was Vilhez, and she was a soldier of the Mole Knight Empire. She had now been assigned to be Lady Tarakamari's personal servant. Tarakamari felt apprehensive, thinking that the maid might be after money. Vilhez then explained that she wasn't an enemy but rather a friend of Tarakamari. As they debated like this, Tarakamari suddenly felt a shiver running down her spine. Yes, she needed to use the restroom. She got up from the bed and headed towards the toilet. However, Vilhez stopped her and told her they didn't have time. They both needed to leave for the imperial palace. Kamari rebelled and insisted on going to the toilet. But Vilhez was much stronger than Kamari, and she couldn't resist, no matter how hard she tried. Kamari suspected that Vilhez wanted to abduct her because she was a beautiful girl born only once every 100 million years. Fortunately, Kamari's father arrived and asked Vilhez to release Kamari. Kamari then asked her father who Vilhez was. Her father replied that she was the maid who would serve Kamari starting today. Kamari, of course, refused and said she didn't need a maid, especially not one as frightening as her. Her father explained that it was an order from Her Majesty, the Emperor. Certainly, Kamari was perplexed. Vilhez then tried to explain by asking Kamari if she knew about the Shichigitin. Kamari responded that of course she knew about it. Shichigitin was the 7 most powerful vampires leading the Mole Knight forces. Vilhez continued. Now Miss Kamari had become one of them. Kamari's father then continued with a flashback from some time ago when he asked Kamari to find a job. At that time, Kamari replied that she would work if she could become the emperor. Her father was deeply moved by this response and immediately reported it to the emperor, asking for a position for Kamari. The emperor was, of course, very angry, but Kamari's father went on to talk about how clever Kamari was and how she was a beautiful girl born only once every 100 million years. The emperor became interested and immediately made a contract with Kamari while she was asleep, appointing her as one of the Shichigitin. Kamari was taken aback upon hearing this. It turns out the Emperor made the contract with her while she was asleep by kissing her. The scene shifted to the Emperor's chamber, where the Emperor, who was actually a woman, was running towards Kamari with great joy. She then approached Kamari and said that she wanted to massage her breasts. Vilhais reminded the Emperor not to tease Kamari too much, as she might cry. Kamari felt slightly annoyed because the Emperor had kissed her without permission while she was asleep. The Emperor then invited Kamari to talk in another place. Sitting on her throne, the Emperor brought out a guidebook on the duties of the Shishigiten, with the cover featuring a photo of the two of them in the position before the kiss. The Emperor explained that the duty of the Shishigiten was one, to win against other nations within a 3-month period. If they could win 100 times, they would be appointed as the next Emperor candidate. Kamari then asked what would happen if she lost. Would she be fired? The Emperor replied that if she lost continuously, her body would explode and her head would fly into the sky. Kamari was shocked and felt her hopes shatter. The Emperor continued by explaining that Kamari would be assisted by Unit 7, consisting of 500 soldiers. They would help Kamari, but if they saw their leader was weak, they would kill her. Kamari became even more fearful. The Emperor then explained that vampires were creatures with ambitions to become rulers. She asked Kamari and confirmed that she was a weak creature, right? Kamari replied that she was indeed very weak. The Emperor replied that if Kamari didn't want to die, she had to hide it as best as she could. Whatever happened, Kamari had to act like a strong person in front of her subordinates. The Emperor also sent the maid, Vilhais, to assist her. However, Kamari became suspicious and made sure that Vilhais wouldn't betray her. The next day, Kamari was already wearing her new uniform. She walked alongside Vilhais, who complimented her appearance in the new uniform. They eventually arrived at the large door, behind which the soldiers were waiting for their leader, Kamari. Vilhais invited Kamari to enter, but she couldn't open the large door, even with all her strength. After struggling, the door finally shifted and opened slightly. However, from inside the room, a man was seen running toward the door, saying, "Die, Your Excellency General." But because the door wasn't fully open, only his head passed through, and his body got stuck in the door. The man fell, covered in blood. Kamari was naturally very anxious, fearing that her troops had found out how weak she was. She entered the room by stepping over the man's lifeless body. Inside the room, Kamari stood in front of her soldiers, who appeared rough and indifferent. One of them expressed his admiration for Kamari for successfully dealing with Johann Helders, the man who died when Kamari entered earlier, who happened to be the most vicious member of Unit 7. Kamari arrogantly stated that she only needed one pinky finger to kill a vampire like him. Upon hearing this, all the soldiers believed in her, becoming afraid of their new leader. Suddenly, Vilhais chimed in, saying that Kamari had also killed 100 vampires with just her pinky finger when she was a child. Vilhais added that Kamari could wipe out everyone there in just 5 seconds. In her heart, Kamari was annoyed with Vilhais for exaggerating, as everyone surely knew it was a lie. Kamari then delivered a speech to her troops, introducing herself as the new Shishigiten. She spoke loudly, but since she had never given a speech before, at one point, she stuttered. She felt nervous and looked at Vilhais for assistance. Vilhais said that Kamari was extremely nervous now, even tripping over her words, but wasn't it cute? Kamari thought to herself that Vilhais' words only made matters worse. Kamari continued her speech, saying that every day would involve battles, so there was no time for laziness. They just needed to be silent and obey the orders of their strong, intelligent, and sweet leader without ever thinking of rebelling. The scene continued with them on the battlefield, facing the Lapelico Kingdom. Kamari stood on a hill, continuing to praise herself, while her troops fought against the enemy. Not long after, there was a report that Lieutenant Bellius had successfully killed the enemy's general. They were optimistic about winning. Kamari, with arrogance, said that if she joined the battle, she would eliminate the enemy's generals in 3 seconds. But she revised her statement, saying that she could wipe them all out in just 1 second. Her troops were deeply impressed and cheered her name. Not long after, a journalist named Melfatiano from the Six Nations newspaper approached Kamari. She requested permission to interview her, and Kamari granted it. The journalist asked many questions, such as how Kamari became a Shishigiten, how she managed to kill 100 vampires with just her pinky finger, her favorite food, her first kiss, and so on. Kamari felt uncomfortable with all these questions and argued that strong people don't talk much, and she would only reveal a little. Kamari outlined her simple plan, which was to conquer the world. Therefore, she would eliminate 5 generals from 5 other countries with military power. She also mentioned that her favorite food was omelet rice. Hearing this, Kamari's troops were extremely proud and thankful to have such a strong and ambitious leader. The journalist took pictures of Kamari from various angles. As the day turned into evening, all the troops headed back, exhausted from the battle. The enemy troops lay defeated on the battlefield. Suddenly, a light approached them, and they rose from their apparent deaths. Kamari, witnessing this, explained that in her world, there was no fighting to the death. The 6 countries in her world each had a special device for a ritual that channeled limitless magical energy called Makaku. When you were within the Makaku's influence, no matter how severe your injuries or the extent of your death, you would heal within a certain period. The place where Kamari stood was called the Makaku Zone, an area where 6 Makaku zones overlapped, and all inter-country wars took place within this area. Villehais then approached Kamari and explained that this was what people referred to as war as entertainment. In the morning, Kamari woke up from her deep sleep, and when she opened her eyes, she saw Villehais right in front of her. They had slept in the same bed. Kamari was shocked and immediately told her to move. Villehais then showed Kamari the newspaper that came out that morning. Kamari read it, and the headline read, "New Shichigitan has appeared. I will turn the entire world into omelet rice. Omelet rice is my favorite food. I will kill the other 5 generals, garnish them with tomato sauce, and make them overflowing omelet rice." Kamari was terrified by the news, and she promptly tore the newspaper she had just read. From the article, it seemed like she had challenged the other countries. Villehais even added that the article mentioned that the chimpanzee-shaped soldiers they defeated yesterday had sworn not to forgive her and wanted to ridicule the war leader, Kamari. Kamari became even more frightened, pulled a blanket over herself, and hid underneath it. Villehais tried to comfort Kamari by saying she didn't need to worry because she would protect her virginity. Villehais then wanted to remind Kamari of today's agenda, but Kamari covered her ears, refusing to listen, and just wanted to sleep. Villehais had another strategy to get Kamari to comply. In a flat tone, Villehais began to recite a love poem written on several sheets of paper. Hearing this, Kamari immediately got up from her bed and tried to stop Villehais. Yes, it was a romance novel written by Kamari, which had been accidentally found by Villehais in the trash. Villehais threatened that if Kamari skipped today, she would spread Kamari's romance novel throughout the emperor's palace. Kamari eventually approached Villehais and promised to obey all her orders as long as she didn't tell anyone about it. Seeing Kamari's cute face, Villehais immediately had a severe nosebleed. Then she hugged Kamari and said she couldn't bear to do that. Villehais was overjoyed as she hugged Kamari, sniffing her head and saying she smelled much better than just sniffing her pillow. Kamari, of course, felt uncomfortable and disgusted by the situation. Night fell and Kamari lay down in her room, feeling exhausted. Before sleeping, she thought about when was the last time she had talked to someone this much. She drifted off, and in her dream, she remembered a time when 3 girls bullied her. Kamari could only remain silent as they pulled her hair. In her dream, Kamari muttered that she didn't like the pain while shedding tears. Meanwhile, in another place, a mysterious woman was reading the newspaper from earlier in the morning, which had a photo of Kamari. Holding a knife, she cut the newspaper and said that she wouldn't forgive her.